Hey, I'm Jay, and you're listening to Mindset Monday, a new series on the More Than podcast created to be the perfect dose of inspiration and motivation while giving you tangible tools to shift your mindset in a more positive direction. After all, your life is only as good as your mindset. I'm so glad you're here. What's up, fam? Welcome back to Mindset Monday. Today's episode is super special because as you're listening to this, I'm currently in Arizona judging the finals of Miss Arizona USA 2024. And this is such a nostalgic honor for me because not only is it 10 years since I competed in my first ever pageant and was crowned Miss Arizona USA 2014, it's also the first time that I'm on the other side and able to judge now and watch two women's lives completely change overnight. And it's been a very humbling, nostalgic, exciting, reflective period of time for me leading up to this pageant. And I realized that I don't talk all that often, especially on the podcast, about that chapter of my life, about being Miss Arizona USA, mainly because in my mind, it was so long ago, even though it doesn't quite feel like 10 years ago. It feels like it was like maybe 2 years ago, but I wouldn't be who I am today without that chapter of my life. I know that for sure. It taught me so much about myself. It helped me develop my passion for confidence and mental health. It helped me with public speaking. It introduced me to the most incredible people and just opened my eyes to a whole new world that I never even knew existed. And as I look back at 19-year-old Baby J getting ready to compete in her first ever pageant, there's some mindset things that I was doing then that I wasn't even consciously aware of, but I believe it really set me up for success going into pageant weekend. And I still try and be intentional about implementing that mindset into my life now. So I want to walk you guys through that experience from just a different lens and a different perspective now that I can look back and see a whole story, see the whole picture. So despite what a lot of people believe, I did not grow up in pageantry. I had never even seen a Miss USA or a Miss America before I actually competed. To be brutally honest, I didn't even know there was a difference between Miss America and Miss USA until after I won, which I know will piss some people off in the actual pageant world, but that just shows you how inexperienced I was and how I just went into that chapter of my life without any expectations. Growing up, I've talked on here before about how I was just a really insecure kid. I always wanted to be in front of the spotlight. I always loved performing, but I was really insecure and didn't want to be judged on a solo one-on-one level. So pageantry, modeling was stuff I wanted to do, just never actually persisted. That's not a word, so cut that out. Never actually put myself out there to try it. So when I was graduating high school from the ages of 17 to 19, I had some serious health issues that caused me to ultimately lose 60 pounds. I then competed in a fitness competition and really transformed my life and my body in a 3-month period. And that was between my sophomore and my junior year of college. So when I went back into college, I was an entirely different version of myself. And I was sitting in a sorority meeting. I was a Kappa Alpha Theta at the time. And the director for the Miss Arizona USA pageant came in and started talking all about what it would be like to compete in the pageant and what the opportunities would be like if you did win. It was never once on my radar to raise my hand and say that I was interested. And one of my sorority sisters right in front of me shouted out my name. And I was so embarrassed. I remember my cheeks getting so red and being like, how do I tell her? Hell no. And then a bunch of the girls all started talking about the fact that I should absolutely do it. My name's written down. And ultimately 5 of us decided we're going to do it. Why not? One of my best friends was also agreeing to compete. So I looked at it like it's just going to be a fun weekend. What do I have to lose? Well, the following day, the assistant to the director called me and told me how much it was to enter into pageant weekend. And y'all, I was working at a place called My Fit Foods at the time. It was $2,000 to enter the pageant, and I did not have $2,000 to my name. And she started talking about how when the winner is crowned that you have all these sponsors throughout the year. So I put on my little business cap and was like, okay, well, if the winner gets all these sponsors, why couldn't I get that as a contestant? So I hustled my booty off for the couple months leading up to the pageant. I believe I only had 3 months to prepare and was Miss Tempe USA. I was going to ASU at the time. And I went to my nail salon and pitched them and ended up getting them to sponsor me so I could get my nails for free. Got my spray tans for free, my extensions for free, my outfits for the weekend for free. And I had just gotten signed to a modeling agent and connected with somebody who was able to pull wardrobe from all these different fashion houses in LA. And so this girl literally pulled a gown for me that Paris Hilton had just worn like 2 weeks prior. I thought that was the coolest thing ever. My swimsuit was sponsored. And I found this company that only sponsored USC fighters at the time and pitched them to be able to fund the upfront $2,000 to go into it for the weekend. It was called Boni Acai. I don't know if they're even around anymore. If they are, shout out to Boni Acai. You guys are amazing. I was the face of their brand for a hot second. They paid me and they paid me to get into pageant weekend. So that was the most exciting part of the process for me. That's what I was putting my time and attention into because I knew that if I had all of that in order and I was able to connect with all these amazing people, I loved the idea of sponsorship even more than I loved the idea of actually winning because, to be honest, winning never crossed my mind. It was more, how do I use this opportunity to propel me forward? How do I use it to boost my modeling career? How do I use it to start a business? It wasn't, if and when I become Miss Arizona USA, these are all the things I'm going to do. And I think that really saved me at the time because I wasn't so emotionally tied to and invested to the outcome. I just wanted to have fun. I wanted to live this whole new experience and push myself and see what I was capable of. I went into pageant weekend, roomed with my best friend, was competing with a handful of sorority sisters, meeting all these amazing brand new women, and everything was a new experience. Everything was so much fun. Everyone's stories were so fascinating to me, and I just loved the process of preparing for this grand finale of the finals. And I remember prelims came and went. I felt really confident and said, hey, if I get into top 10, that's enough for me. That's all I want is just to make it into top 10. It's my first ever pageant, and I'll be happy with that. I remember on finals getting called into the top 10 and checking that off the bucket list, being like, awesome, I can go home now and be perfectly content. Next thing I know, I'm called into top 5. And then it's top 3. And then I'm doing an onstage question. And everything from there was such a blur. But one thing about me is when you put me in an atmosphere like that, when there's lights and cameras in front of you, that's when my insecurities just kind of start to melt away because I think adrenaline is pumping through me and I'm so excited to just be present that I don't listen to the negative thoughts and the negative voice in my head. And that really served me at that time because I gave an authentic answer. I was just grateful to be in that position. And the next thing I know, I'm holding hands with me and one other girl. And if you watch my crowning video, which I'll have my assistant put it into the video portion of this if you're watching on YouTube, if you see this crowning video, I literally didn't comprehend that I had just won. I pushed the girl in front of me, I go to clap for her, and then you see the other title holders come out and literally put a crown and sash on me, and it finally clicks in my head oh my God, I just won this thing. I was just so naive and so overwhelmed and excited and genuinely did not expect it. My Miss Teen USA comes up right next to me. She's a Taylor Swift lookalike. She's the most stunning, well put together. At the time, she's 14 years old. And I was really looking to her okay, what do we do next? How do I step into this role? Who is Miss Arizona USA? And I was proud of myself that when I started, I very much went into this new season of my life that Miss Arizona USA is going to be everything that I am. I get to embody whoever I want to throughout this chapter. I get to bring fresh energy, a fresh perspective, and just fully enjoy this unbelievable platform that I've been given. I remember Britt, the director, asking me, what do you want out of this year? And I said I wanted to pursue a modeling career, and I really wanted to do public speaking and talk to young women about the importance of confidence and chasing your dreams. And I genuinely believed everything that I was saying. I started going to schools where I would talk to elementary schoolers, middle schoolers, high schoolers, colleges, and I felt so fueled by encouraging other people that you can go after and you can do anything you set your mind to, and I'm living proof of that. Unfortunately, something shifted during that time where I stopped practicing what I preached, and I stopped listening to my own intuition and stopped leaning into my own individuality. And I think that's because I was so naive and so impressionable, given I'm only 19, I had just turned 20, and I was looking to everybody else to tell me who I needed to be in order to become the next Miss USA. And I never stopped and thought to myself, like, do I actually want that? Is that actually my goal, to become the next Miss USA? It was just, that's what we're supposed to do. And I'm supposed to prepare myself the best I can so that I can become her. And that's just the trajectory of my life. And the professionals that were around me were following a mold that they've seen worked in the past. Instantly, I was told I needed a boob job. I needed to lose weight. I needed darker spray tans. I needed longer extensions. My favorite one was that I was told my teeth are too small and I needed full veneers. And thank God I had a strong, badass mom that stepped in and was like, you're not doing any of those things. We're not doing any cosmetic procedures on you for a pageant. Like, that's not the reason that you go into those things. And thank God she did, because now I love my small teeth and I'm so glad I don't have a mouthful of veneers. But I was so desperate to be who everybody else wanted me to be. I looked at myself like this Barbie, that if I could just change and manipulate just enough to please the people around me and to become who they wanted me to become, then I'd be happy. And the unfortunate thing is, throughout that process, I lost myself and I ended up becoming very, very deeply unhappy. I 100% tied my worth to my weight. And when I started going through metabolic damage, it was about 3-ish months before I left to compete for Miss USA. So even though I had this insane training schedule, I was taking fat burners, my diet was super clean, I was gaining weight. And thank God I had the trainer that I had at that time as a sponsor, because he was so hyper fixated on me working on self-worth and self-esteem instead of just tying my worth to my weight. And it pissed me off at the time. All I wanted was for him to give me a quick fix so that I could lose enough weight so that I could look thin enough on that stage. And he didn't do that. And I'm so grateful that he didn't do that. Instead, he just kept hounding me that I am good enough as I am, that I needed to stop putting so much emotional attachment to the outcome. And I now look back on that and I'm so grateful that I had that voice in my head at that time, because the people you surround yourself with really does dictate who you become. And I had a handful of amazing people in my circle then, but I also had some outside people come into that circle that were solely there just to see what they could get out of me during that period of time. And I was very trusting and I was very open. And the people pleaser in me just wanted everybody to tell me that I was enough. And when I didn't hear that, I completely crumbled. When I left for Miss USA, I was a shell of the person that I was when I competed for Miss Arizona USA. And I wish I could go back and change up my mindset, because it never had anything to do with the way that I looked. If I look back at those photos, I see a beautiful young woman that was lost and that was confused and that was so desperate to fit some type of a mold without ever understanding that that individuality was what made me special. I was trying to dim my own light and look to other people and compare myself to other people, which is so easy to do when you're in an environment like that. There's 51 of the most beautiful women I've ever seen in my life that I was competing against. And I couldn't help but look at every single one of them and see what they had that I didn't. And I crumbled during those 2 weeks. I have such a vivid memory that there was this hotel room that had all like the snacks and the water and staff. And if you needed anything, you could go to this like one communal area. And it was right across the hall from where my hotel room was. And they had a scale in there. And I became so obsessive with weighing myself in the morning and at night, which is one thing I was told specifically from my trainer, do not weigh yourself when you're there. And me not listening, I'm doing it twice a day, and started developing some really unhealthy habits while I was there. And because I was unhappy with the number that I was seeing, I self-sabotaged. I did not bring my A game. I did not show up in the way that I was proud to show up in, that I would have been so proud of myself leaving that environment if I knew that I gave it my all. And I didn't do that. Luckily, when I was on stage for prelims, I shined through a little bit more than I did during finals, and I made it to the top 10, which again was my only goal. Like, just make it to top 10, make it to the live telecast, and then after that, whatever happens, happens. And I remember Florida Georgia Line and Nelly being on stage performing. I walk out right after them. And then when I'm standing there as they're narrowing down from 10 to 5 and my state didn't get called, I was so relieved, which is a horrible feeling to feel. But I was just like, oh, thank God, get me off the stage. Like, I don't want anybody else to see me. I wasn't confident in the way that I looked. I didn't have my own voice even when I was there, because I had a very clear vision of this is how I want my hair, this is how I want my makeup. But when I got into the professionals' chairs, they did opposite of that. And instead of speaking up and saying like these changes need to be made so that I could feel the most confident, I didn't want to offend them. So I went out literally with a costume on. Like, I don't look at all like myself. Like, please don't Google those pictures, but also if you have to, just to be able to see what I'm talking about. Like, it is not Jordan in those photos. And since I just felt like a shell, I just wanted to get out of that spotlight, out of the stage, and go straight into the next chapter of my life where I didn't feel so much pressure about changing myself to become this Miss USA. And as soon as the lights go out, as soon as the telecast is done, you are literally there to fend for yourself. I don't think they even coordinated how we got back to the hotel. It was just like, okay, on to the next. One of my dear friends is the one that actually won Miss USA. And it's like the attention focused, and all 50 girls that didn't get that spot were just left like, oh, now what? We've just done so much to get to this position. And it just felt very empty. And not because we all didn't win the one title that we were going for. I think it's because so many of us had revolved our entire life and attached so much of our self-worth into the outcome without fully just being able to enjoy the experience. And when I stepped away from that experience, I really crawled into a hole, for lack of a better word. I stopped doing the public speaking that I was enjoying so much, mainly because there was my first interview when I got back from Baton Rouge, Louisiana. It was a live interview, and they asked me on live TV how it felt to be one of the biggest girls to compete at Miss USA. And it was like every negative thought that I had ever had about myself was validated in that moment. And it was on live TV, and it was a stranger that didn't even know me that was comfortable enough asking me that question. And it destroyed my self-esteem and my confidence in that moment. And it literally caused me to step away from the spotlight completely. I stopped doing appearances. I completely stopped modeling. I wanted my reign to be over because I was so embarrassed with the fact that I was representing the state, because I didn't feel like I was enough. For context too, that year, there was a girl that I don't even believe she was a size 6, but they kept pushing that she was a size 6. She was the biggest girl to have competed at Miss USA. She literally was on Good Morning America talking about being the biggest girl. And at the time when you're in it, like, nobody wants that direct spotlight, knowing how hard we've worked for this and how much we, like, when you're showing up in a bikini on stage on national television, nobody wants to be told that they don't look the way that they were expected to look. It's not good for anybody's self-esteem. It's not good for anybody's confidence. And thankfully, I feel like we're in a little bit of a different time now, that people would be a little bit more aware to not say something like that out loud. But at the time, it's reinforcing these unrealistic beauty standards that a lot of us didn't meet. And then after pageantry, there's no support when you're done. And unfortunately, I've seen so many women that I competed with and that have competed before me and after me that struggle permanently with their self-esteem and their confidence because they were torn apart by a subjective opinion of judges. And that's my biggest beef with the pageant world, even though that's what it was designed to do, and it is a subjective opinion. But now going into this pageant for Miss Arizona USA 2024 as a judge, it's a hard position to be in because it is one pageant, it is one night that you're looking at that changes the course of people's lives. And I think the most important thing that if you are competing in a pageant or apply this to anything else that you're working towards in your life, that you can show up and bring your A game to one night, to one meeting, to one experience. And even if it's not quote unquote enough in that moment, doesn't mean you're not enough. Just because you don't win doesn't mean you're not enough. Just because you didn't get the promotion doesn't mean you're not enough. Removing the feeling surrounding the external outcome is one of the most powerful lessons I've ever learned. And I think that's why I was able to be as successful as I was in the modeling industry, because when I went back into the modeling industry after taking 2 years off, I stopped tying my worth to the outcome, whether somebody said yes or no, whether somebody said I was pretty or not, if I was big or small. It didn't matter anymore because I had this deep inherent knowing that I was enough as I was, and it didn't matter what anybody else had to say. And there's an ongoing sentiment that it's like, don't care about other people's opinions, doesn't matter. That's not real life. I think everybody to a degree cares about what other people think about them, and that's okay. In some ways, that's healthy. What's unhealthy about it is when you place all of your own self-worth based on other people's opinions and validation. That's what I did, and that's where I got lost. That if I was able to go back to 20-year-old Jordan and tell myself, you are good enough as you are, be you, and stop worrying so much about changing yourself to become what you think other people want you to become. The outcome could have been different, and I also would have carried myself much differently throughout that chapter. And the title was something for me that boosted notoriety that got the door open for me for a lot of things. And even to this day, if I tell somebody I was Miss Arizona USA, the way that I'm treated is differently. The opportunities that I get are different. And I was very resentful of that immediately after I gave up my crown, that I almost didn't want to tell people because I felt so defined by it. And I was doing the exact opposite of what I do now, where I wasn't embracing all of the different unique labels that make up Jordan. And I think that's something that applies to every single one of you listening too, that there's labels that you've given yourself or that other people have given to you that you either hide behind or you feel defined by. And instead of looking at it from that perspective, I think it's really powerful to look at the many labels that make you a multifaceted human being. Whether that is an accomplishment, whether that is trauma that has happened to you, whether that is a role that you have in your life, those things are a part of you. You don't have to hide them or be ashamed of them as much as you can use them to boost yourself up. And now I look back at that version of myself that had gone through some really hard stuff during that chapter. I was physically, mentally, emotionally, and financially abused during that 1 year. And I didn't want to deal with it for many, many years later. And you guys have heard me say this many times throughout the podcast, that unresolved trauma manifests itself in many unique and crazy ways. But I wanted to stuff that down and hide that as much as I possibly could. And once I came to terms that that is one of the labels and one of the parts that make me who I am, and I can embrace all of it, the good, the bad, the ugly, it was a huge confidence boost for me. that self-awareness piece is so powerful. And self-awareness to me is learning to embrace the good and the bad, because it's part of who you are and you don't have to hide away from that. So a mindset that I had back when I was 19 years old is still something that I look back to often. And I'm proud of myself for doing it without even realizing that I was doing it then, because I built so many skills and so many mindset shifts and really took control of my thoughts throughout different chapters and different seasons in my 20s that has all led me to this moment. So however bits and pieces of this story resonate with you, I think it's really cool to just take a moment and be reflective today and think of yourself 10 years ago. We're all in very different stages of our lives, but maybe 10 years ago you were in college. Maybe 10 years ago you had just gotten married or just gotten your first job. Whatever it is, look back at that and see how far you've come. So often we're so fixated on what's next and I'm not doing enough and I'm not enough, or whatever false narrative is playing through your mind. But if you look back to that younger version of you, I promise you've done many, many things to make them proud. If you start viewing your accomplishments, if you start viewing your successes and your failures from a lens of what did I learn from that and why am I who I am today because of that, it can be really beautiful and it can be really powerful. Don't look at your past with regret or saying I should have done this or I should have done that. Instead, accept it for what it was and take the lesson that you learned from that, apply it to the present day so that your future can look that much different, that much brighter, and that much better. So I hope that there's a piece in here that really resonated with you guys. Make sure you're keeping up with me on social, because I will be posting all about the whole pageant weekend. And I'm excited to see how one lucky girl, or actually two lucky girls' lives are going to completely change based off of this one crazy weekend. I'm living proof that it can absolutely change your life and amazing things can come from it. So thank you guys for listening. Make sure that you are following The More Than Show on Apple and Spotify. Make sure you share this episode with a friend, share it on social. If you haven't already, leave us a rating and a review. And I will see you on Thursday with another amazing episode, and next Monday for another Mindset Monday. Love you guys.